The bank doors were heavy that morning, though they had always swung easily for others. For Daniel Reed, they might as well have been gates to a fortress guarding the hopes he carried in his chest. He was younger then, with the kind of raw hunger in his eyes that only desperation breeds. His clothes were neat, though second-hand, and his shoes, scuffed at the edges, whispered a story of too many miles walked without choice. Daniel had clutched the loan application papers until the edges bent. Every word on those pages was a plea, every number a gamble. He had an idea, a plan that could turn his life around. A small logistics company tailored to the growing demand of online markets that were just beginning to rise. He had researched the routes, the vehicles, the costs, the margins. He knew in his bones that it could work. But to others, he looked like just another dreamer wandering into the marble-floored temple of money. The banker, Mr. Harlan Whitaker, sat behind his desk like a king on a throne. He was a tall man with slicked-back silver hair, a crisp suit, and a smile that never reached his eyes. When Daniel spoke, pouring out his vision with trembling but earnest words, Harlan leaned back, listening with the air of someone tolerating noise rather than absorbing meaning. "So let me get this straight. You want us to lend you money to buy trucks, to deliver things, packages, is that it? Like a courier?" Daniel nodded, gripping the armrest of the chair. "Yes, sir, but not just packages. Supply chains are shifting. Smaller businesses can't afford big contracts. They'll need reliable, flexible delivery. I've charted the routes, the growth patterns." Harlan chuckled, cutting him off. "Son, do you know how many young men walk in here every month with grand ideas about changing the world? And do you know what happens to them? They fail, miserably, because ambition doesn't pay loans back. Money does. And from where I'm sitting, I don't see any." The other clerks in the room stifled laughter, eyes darting away in mock pity. Heat burned Daniel's face, but he forced himself to stay steady. "I have collateral," he tried. "My father's land, which isn't worth half of what you're asking for," Harlan put in again. "You're not just broke, you're naive. You think because you can string together some business jargon, suddenly we should hand you hundreds of thousands? This is a bank, Mr. Reed, not a charity." The words lodged like splinters. Still Daniel pressed on. "Please, sir, just give me a chance. I will pay it back, every cent. I just need someone to believe in me." Harlan leaned forward, his eyes cold. "And why would I? Look at you. No track record, no reputation, no family money. People like you don't make it in this world. You borrow, you struggle, you fail. Then you come crawling back, begging again. And we," his smile widened cruelly, "say no." The laughter that followed wasn't just from Harlan. It spread like a ripple from clerks and assistants, tiny echoes of mockery that filled the room. Daniel stood frozen, his application crumpling in his fists. Finally, he left, each step heavier than the last, the echo of their laughter chasing him out the doors. Outside, the city moved on. Cars honked, people walked, phones buzzed, but Daniel felt like he had been split open. Humiliation burned through him, yet underneath the sting, something darker stirred. Not just anger, resolve. That night, as he sat on his father's porch, staring at the land he had almost offered up, Daniel whispered a promise to himself. "They'll see. One day they'll see who I am, and they'll regret every word." The years that followed were a grindstone. Daniel worked jobs no one else wanted, saved every penny, and learned every corner of the logistics world from the ground up. He drove trucks until his hands blistered, then fixed them when they broke down. He slept in warehouses, ate in diners, and studied markets late into the night. Slowly, the dream that Harlan Whitaker had laughed at began to take shape, not through loans, but through Daniel's blood and grit. By the time he reached his 30s, he owned 3 trucks, then 5, then a fleet. He didn't just deliver packages, he built networks. Businesses trusted him because he never failed them. When others cut corners, Daniel went the extra mile. And when online commerce exploded, his company was already there, strong and ready to catch the wave. Investors who once wouldn't return his calls now lined up at his door. He chose carefully, never forgetting the lesson of the bank, that no one would hand him power. He had to take it. He grew his company into a regional giant, then national. By his 40s, Daniel Reed was no longer the desperate young man in second-hand clothes. He was a self-made magnate, his empire stretching across states, his name whispered in boardrooms. And yet the memory of that morning in the bank never left him. It wasn't the denial of the loan that haunted him. It was the laughter, the way Harlan had dismissed him as though his life and dreams were worthless. Every deal Daniel struck, every expansion he pushed, was fuel on the quiet fire inside him. Success wasn't enough. Revenge would be the true satisfaction. It was fate, then, that brought the opportunity. One of his investment managers approached him with a quiet tip. The very bank that had humiliated him years ago, Whitaker & Sons Trust, though everyone simply called it Whitaker's Bank, was faltering. Poor management, bad investments in shifting markets had left cracks in the foundation. The once proud institution was bleeding, and they needed a lifeline. He sat in silence as he absorbed the information, his glass of bourbon untouched on the table. The room around him was sleek, modern, with the trappings of wealth he had earned, but in his mind he was back in that marble-floored office, hearing the sneer in Harlan's voice. "So find out how much," Daniel said finally, his voice low but steady, "and make it happen." It took months of maneuvering, of negotiations hidden behind shell companies and quiet deals. Piece by piece he acquired shares. By the time Whitaker realized what was happening, it was too late. Daniel Reed had become the bank's majority investor. And so, on a bright morning years after he had once left in shame, he walked through those heavy doors again. Only this time, they opened easily. Clerks straightened as he passed, their smiles polite, unaware of the storm he carried with him. When he reached the executive floor, a secretary moved to stop him. "Sir, do you have an appointment?" Daniel's lips curled into a faint smile. "Tell Harlan Whitaker," he said, his voice steady, "that his new boss has arrived." Harlan Whitaker had grown older, but arrogance clung to him like a second skin. The silver in his hair had thinned, and his once crisp jawline sagged with age, yet he still carried himself as if the world owed him deference. He sat behind the same mahogany desk, sipping from a crystal glass, reviewing quarterly losses that clawed at the bank's legacy. When the secretary's words reached him, he almost laughed. His new boss? Absurd. No one, no outsider could dictate to him within these walls. The Whitakers had run this bank for 3 generations. His father had ruled it before him, and his son, Brandon, was being groomed to take over. The very idea that some stranger claimed ownership was an insult. "Send him in," Harlan barked, setting his glass down with a clink. He would enjoy putting whoever this fool was back in his place. The door opened, and in walked Daniel Reed. For a long moment, the years collapsed. Harlan's memory sparked, recalling a younger face, a desperate man clutching papers, stammering about delivery trucks. Recognition flickered in his eyes, though he quickly masked it behind disdain. "You," Harlan said slowly. "I remember you. The boy with the, what was it, courier dream? I thought you'd have gone broke by now." Daniel didn't sit. He stood tall, his suit tailored, his presence commanding the room with an ease that made Harlan bristle. "Courier dream," Daniel repeated softly, as though tasting the words. "That dream built a logistics empire spanning 3 continents. That dream outgrew every obstacle you said I would fail against. And now, Mr. Whitaker, that dream owns this bank." Harlan blinked, confusion knotting his brow. "Owns? What are you talking about?" Daniel slid a folder across the desk. Inside, documents confirmed the nightmare. Reed Enterprises, through a web of subsidiaries, now held 54% controlling interest in Whitaker and Sons Trust. The signatures, the dates, the seals, all irrefutable. "No," Harlan whispered, voice cracking. This is a trick, a stunt." "It's neither. It's business. The same business you mocked me for not understanding. I am now your majority investor, your chairman, and by every rule you once lorded over others, your superior." The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. Harlan's face paled, then flushed, anger surging to mask fear. "You think you can waltz in here and humiliate me? This is my bank. My family's name is on the door." Daniel leaned forward, his voice low and sharp. "Your name may be on the door, but mine is on the deeds. Paper doesn't lie. Numbers don't bow to legacies. From this day forward, you answer to me." The secretary outside heard the crash when Harlan's glass shattered against the wall, but she also heard Daniel's voice, calm as stone, cutting through the chaos. "Throw another glass, and I'll have security escort you out of this building you no longer own." Word spread quickly. Staff whispered in corners, investors scrambled for clarity, and the Whitaker family seethed behind closed doors. For decades, they had wielded power unchallenged. Now an outsider, that outsider, held the reins. Daniel wasted no time. He convened a board meeting the next morning. Every member arrived tense, uncertain, and curious. At the head of the long oak table sat Daniel, composed, eyes scanning the room like a general surveying his troops. Harlan stormed in late, face thunderous, with his son Brandon at his side. Brandon, younger, brash, carried the same entitled arrogance, though without the polish. He sneered openly at Daniel. "This is a farce," Harlan declared. "Gentlemen, ladies, we all know this bank was built on integrity and tradition. My father's legacy cannot be undermined by an upstart with a checkbook." Daniel let him speak. Let the bluster spill into the room. When silence finally fell, he stood. "Integrity?" Daniel said softly. "I came to this bank years ago with a dream and a plan. I asked for a chance. What I received was not integrity, it was humiliation. I was laughed at, belittled, dismissed as worthless. That was the culture this bank stood for, arrogance without vision." Murmurs rippled through the board. Some shifted uncomfortably, remembering the stories of Whitaker's cruelty. Daniel's voice hardened. "But times have changed. This bank is drowning because of outdated thinking, poor investments, nepotism, arrogance. From today, Whitaker and Sons is under new leadership. We will modernize, innovate, and restore strength. But we will also remember, no one who walks through those doors will ever be mocked for dreaming." The room was silent, save for the faint ticking of the clock. Harlan slammed his fist on the table. "You can't!" "I can," Daniel interrupted, eyes locking onto his, "and I will. You have 2 choices, Harlan. Stay on as a ceremonial advisor, stripped of real power, or step aside entirely. But make no mistake, your reign is over." For the first time in his life, Harlan Whitaker had no retort. His mouth opened, then closed, rage simmering behind his eyes. Brandon whispered furiously in his ear, but it was useless. The papers, the votes, the power, all sat firmly in Daniel's hands. The weeks that followed were a slow unraveling of the Whitaker legacy. Employees who had once bowed to Harlan now deferred to Daniel. Investors rallied behind the new chairman, their confidence renewed. Media outlets picked up the story of the self-made mogul who had taken control of an old banking dynasty, painting Daniel as both ruthless and visionary. But Daniel's satisfaction wasn't just in the headlines, it was in the quiet, private moments. Passing the same clerks who had once laughed at him, now standing to greet him with respect. Sitting in the same office where he had been mocked, now giving orders that shaped the future. Watching Harlan enter meetings with shoulders slumped, his power reduced to ash. One evening, Daniel stayed late walking the empty halls of the bank. He stopped at the lobby, staring at the grand plaque, Whitaker and Sons Trust. For a moment, he considered changing the name, erasing the past entirely. But then he smiled. No, better to leave it. Better for every person who passed through those doors to know that despite the name, the true power belonged to the man they once scorned. The final act came quietly. At the annual shareholders' gala, Daniel took the stage. Cameras flashed, reporters scribbled, and the air was electric. He spoke of growth, innovation, and the future. Then he paused, his gaze sweeping the room until it landed on Harlan in the front row, his expression a mask of bitterness. "I stand here today," Daniel said, voice steady and resonant, "as a man who was not handed power, but one who fought for it. Years ago, I was told I would never succeed. I was told people like me would always crawl, always beg. Tonight, I stand before you as proof that no one decides your worth but you. And to those who doubted me, who mocked me, thank you. Your doubt built my fire. Your laughter built my empire." The applause thundered, echoing through the grand hall. Cameras captured the moment, freezing forever the image of Daniel Reed, the boy once dismissed as worthless, now the man who had conquered the very institution that ridiculed him. As Harlan sat in the shadow of his own downfall, Daniel raised his glass high, not to spite, not even to victory, but to destiny, the kind forged by grit, pain, and unyielding will. For in the end, revenge wasn't in tearing Harlan down. It was in standing taller than he ever dreamed possible. And Daniel Reed stood taller than them all.